used to live by the old Stapleton Airport. And then when I was about 6 years old, we moved out to Aurora, which at that time was the edge of town. I remember our neighborhood, basically you could see farmland and smoke from the horizon from the dump. I would ride my bike to the library and hang out. See, I was one of those kids. I used to read the encyclopedia, and part of this was just going to the library, getting books. But the coolest thing that the library had is they had a schematic map of the USS Enterprise with all of the decks and everything. So I just wanted to see that map all of the time. Growing up, I remember the library just as this, place for knowledge, because I was always curious, and it was just another world. So I'm a lawyer by training, so I went to Georgetown University Law School, came back to Denver and practiced law for about 4 years, but it just wasn't for me. Got to the point where I was singing spirituals in my office, so I figured I needed to do something else. So I actually was going to open up a soul food restaurant at 12th and Delaware, and then I got a chance to work in the Clinton White House because a friend of mine from law school called me up while I was practicing law in Denver and asked me, "Do you have any friends back in DC who might be interested in working in the White House?" And I asked her to explain the job to me, and it was the President's Initiative for One America. It was about racial reconciliation and how we could come together through dialogue. So I worked in the White House for a couple of years, and then after that, I made my way back to Denver, and the job market was really slow. And so I was watching a lot of daytime television, and I figured I needed to read something. And I went to the bookstore and I found this book on Southern food, and that inspired really started the journey towards writing a book on the history of soul food. So soul food's been a passion for me because that's the food I grew up eating. My parents are from the South, and my mom's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my dad is from Helena, Arkansas. And so pretty much during the week, especially on holidays, soul food was the food that we ate. I mean, I've always known about Denver Public Library growing up in the Denver area. And so when I came back from law school, I lived not too far from the Denver Public Library's central location. So that was my main library. And when I started my project on doing the history of soul food, I came across some incredible resources here at the library. The most important one was the Federal Writers Project, which in the 1930s interviewed a lot of African Americans who were formerly enslaved. Denver Public Library in the Western History and Genealogical section, they actually have bound volumes of all about 3,000 of these interviews. And so I would come here after work and on weekends and just read through all of those volumes and index the narratives for references to food. And that really was the core of base of research and knowledge for starting this book on the history of soul food. And I was fortunate that I lived in a community that had a great library, because one, the resources were here, but also because of Denver Public Library's outstanding reputation, I could use the interlibrary loan system, which was something a reference library explained to me, because I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know you could borrow books from other libraries in other states. I live for connection and community. One of the things that troubles me about the current state of our society is that we're just so disconnected from one another in various ways: race, class, political philosophy. So I'm all about trying to find innovative ways to bring us together. And where there are ruptures in our society, where there are divisions, to me, it's about reconciliation. And so that's what's interesting about food, because we all eat. And I find that food is a gateway to talk about things that trouble us, or maybe invite conversations that are difficult. So Denver Public Library offers me pride in my community. So I think it's just a nice convening place for various parts of our community. And it's one of those spaces that you don't see in other parts of our community. And there's very few places where people can come together in this kind of way. At Denver Public Library, what's in it for me? It's a place where I can get community, to come together with like-minded people who thirst for knowledge. Makes me feel that Denver is a great place to live because we support things like the Denver Public Library and other institutions, which I think are critical to being a 21st century city. My name is Adrian Miller. I am the Executive Director of the Colorado Council of Churches. I'm also the author of a book called Soul Food, The Surprising Story of an American Cuisine, One Plate at a Time. And my next book is The President's Kitchen Cabinet, the story of the African Americans who have fed our first families from the Washingtons to the Obamas.